Let's begin with a story that sounds more like the plot of a political thriller than real life. Imagine a US House Speaker desperately trying to shield Donald Trump's dark past. That's what MAGA Mike Johnson seems to be doing. But in his rush to defend Trump, Johnson may have accidentally opened a door to something much bigger: a shady real estate deal involving Trump, a Russian oligarch, and Jeffrey Epstein. Here's where it gets interesting. This isn't just speculation pulled out of thin air. The claims connect directly to reporting by Michael Wolff, a journalist who spent years investigating Donald Trump and was even considered Jeffrey Epstein's almost biographer. Wolff has in his possession over 100 hours of Epstein's taped conversations. He has written multiple books about Trump, and he knows how these powerful figures operated behind the scenes. According to Wolff, Epstein once confided that Donald Trump betrayed him during a high-stakes real estate deal back in 2004. Epstein believed he had the inside track on buying a luxurious property in Palm Beach. He even asked Trump for advice on how to raise its value. But instead of simply giving friendly tips, Trump allegedly went behind Epstein's back, swooped in, and bought the mansion himself for about $41 million. Epstein was furious. He thought Trump had stolen the deal out from under him. And it gets darker. Epstein suspected that Trump didn't even have the money to make that purchase on his own. Where did the funds come from? Epstein wondered if Trump had secretly received the cash from Russian sources. 4 years later, the very same mansion was sold to Dmitry Rybolovlev, a Russian oligarch tied to the fertilizer industry and rumored to have connections to the KGB. The price? An astonishing $95 million. Trump claimed he simply gave the mansion a new paint job, but critics called the transaction suspicious, possibly even a front for laundering money. This fallout destroyed the friendship between Trump and Epstein. Epstein threatened lawsuits and even hinted that he would expose Trump's ties to shady financial deals. That, according to Epstein, was when Trump turned on him. Instead of helping a longtime friend, Trump allegedly tipped off law enforcement about Epstein's sexual crimes, not out of morality, but out of fear that Epstein might reveal Trump's own secrets. Now here's where Mike Johnson comes in. In defending Trump, Johnson tried to spin the narrative. He claimed Trump was some kind of hero, an FBI informant who bravely exposed Epstein. But if you trace the evidence, the picture looks much different. Trump wasn't acting out of justice. He was acting out of self-preservation. He threw Epstein under the bus before Epstein could do the same to him. So, before we dive deeper into the Epstein files, the Russian mansion deal, and the conflicting statements by Trump's defenders, remember this. When politicians like Mike Johnson insist Trump is innocent, their stories don't always line up with the facts. Sometimes, their defense ends up exposing even more than they intend. To really understand how deep this story goes, we need to look closer at Jeffrey Epstein's suspicions about Donald Trump. For years, Epstein and Trump were more than casual acquaintances. They were close friends who partied together, socialized at Mar-a-Lago, and even shared an interest in real estate. But the 2004 Palm Beach mansion deal changed everything. Epstein believed he had secured that property for about $36 million. Confident in the deal, he invited Trump to take a look, hoping for some friendly advice on remodeling and boosting its value. But to Epstein's shock, Trump turned around and outbid him, buying the property for $41 million. It wasn't just betrayal, it was personal humiliation. Epstein felt Trump had stabbed him in the back, and he never forgave him. What made Epstein even more suspicious was Trump's shaky financial situation at the time. Trump's businesses had suffered multiple bankruptcies, and his reputation on Wall Street was far from golden. How could he suddenly afford such a high-stakes cash purchase? Epstein, who was well acquainted with Trump's chaotic finances, thought the money had to come from somewhere else. His theory? A Russian oligarch's hidden hand may have been involved. And this wasn't wild paranoia. 4 years later, Trump flipped the mansion for $95 million, more than double the price, to Dmitry Rybolovlev, a billionaire from Russia's fertilizer industry. To make the deal even stranger, Rybolovlev never even moved into the mansion. He demolished it, claiming it was full of mold. Why would anyone pay $95 million just to tear a house down? That question has haunted investigators and journalists ever since. Michael Wolff, who interviewed Epstein extensively, says Epstein viewed this as proof of something shady. To Epstein, it looked like classic money laundering, Russians funneling money into US real estate, using Trump as the middleman. Epstein was angry, not only because Trump had stolen the deal, but also because he had lost a fortune he thought was his. In Epstein's mind, Trump had destroyed their friendship and their trust. The fallout was explosive. Epstein began threatening Trump, talking about lawsuits, talking about going public, and warning that he could expose Trump as a front for international money laundering. According to Wolf, Epstein even kept photographs of Trump with underage girls at his Palm Beach mansion, pictures that could have been used as leverage if things ever escalated. So how did Trump respond? According to Epstein, Trump panicked. He decided to act before Epstein could. Instead of waiting to be exposed, Trump allegedly tipped off law enforcement about Epstein's sexual abuse of underage girls. But here's the key point: this wasn't about justice. It wasn't about protecting victims. Epstein believed that Trump was only trying to protect himself by sacrificing Epstein first. This flips the official narrative on its head. Defenders like Mike Johnson and Nancy Mace claim Trump was a hero who bravely reported Epstein. But if Epstein's suspicions were true, Trump wasn't a hero at all. He was simply covering his tracks, saving himself from a scandal that could have destroyed him. As the story unfolds, we'll see how this theory ties into Epstein's downfall, Trump's strange role as a possible informant, and why the Epstein files might hold answers that Trump desperately wants to keep buried. Now let's connect this to what's happening today. MAGA Congressman Mike Johnson has been loudly defending Donald Trump, trying to frame him as some kind of righteous whistleblower in the Epstein saga. According to Johnson, Trump was the man who bravely tipped off the FBI about Epstein's crimes and even banned Epstein from Mar-a-Lago out of moral disgust. It sounds like a heroic story, except the details don't quite add up. Let's break it down. Johnson claims Trump acted purely out of conscience, that he was shocked by Epstein's behavior, and that he immediately cut ties with him. But if that were true, why did Trump continue to praise Epstein publicly even after this supposed falling out? In 2002, years after Trump supposedly banned him, Trump told New York Magazine that Epstein was a terrific guy who liked women on the younger side. That's hardly the language of a man who had already drawn a moral line. The contradictions don't end there. If Trump really was the FBI informant who took Epstein down, why hasn't he bragged about it? Think about it. Trump boasts about everything, even things that never happened. He lies about crowd sizes, about business deals, about imaginary phone calls. If he truly had been the man who exposed Epstein, he would have shouted it from every rooftop in America. Instead, he dodges questions, attacks the release of Epstein files, and insists it's all a Democratic hoax. That's not the behavior of a proud whistleblower, that's the behavior of someone hiding something. Michael Wolff adds another layer to this puzzle. He says Epstein himself suspected Trump was the informant, not because Trump wanted justice, but because Trump wanted to protect his own secrets. Wolff recalls Epstein telling him that Trump panicked when their friendship collapsed over the Palm Beach mansion. Epstein believed Trump was terrified that he would expose Trump's shady real estate dealings, so Trump dropped the dime first, sacrificing Epstein to law enforcement before Epstein could destroy him. Even Epstein's threats reveal how precarious Trump's position was. Epstein reportedly said he would expose Trump's ties to Russian money, accusing him of being a frontman for laundering cash into U.S. real estate. If that claim had surfaced in 2004 or 2005, long before Trump's run for president, it could have derailed his business empire and reputation. Trump couldn't afford to let that happen. So, according to Epstein's version of events, he struck first. But here's the irony. When Mike Johnson repeats this story today, trying to make Trump look like a hero, he's actually reviving Epstein's suspicion that Trump was indeed the informant. Only Epstein believed it wasn't out of virtue but out of desperation. Johnson is clumsily confirming a narrative that makes Trump look guilty, not innocent. This leaves us with a critical question. Was Donald Trump really the heroic whistleblower who took down Jeffrey Epstein, or was he a cornered opportunist who betrayed a former friend to save himself from exposure? The evidence, and the contradictions in his defenders' stories, suggest the latter. Now that we understand the betrayal, let's examine how Trump's defenders are spinning the story, and why it doesn't quite add up. Mega figures like Mike Johnson and Republican Congresswoman Nancy Mace have repeatedly claimed Trump was the hero, the man who banned Epstein from Mar-a-Lago and informed the FBI. But when you look at the timeline and Trump's own words, it paints a very different picture. In the early 2000s, after the Palm Beach mansion incident, Trump didn't distance himself from Epstein in the way a moral crusader would. He continued to socialize with him, attended parties, and even promoted him in public statements. In 2002, he described Epstein as a terrific guy who liked women on the younger side. Later, he invited women to Mar-a-Lago under false pretenses of modeling jobs, a pattern Epstein reportedly encouraged. These weren't the actions of a man appalled by illegal activity, they were the actions of a man complicit in it. Even the way Trump discusses the Epstein case today is telling. On social media, he has repeatedly called the entire Epstein story a democratic hoax, comparing it to Russia, Russia, Russia. But here's the problem: if Trump truly acted heroically as an informant, why dismiss the investigation as a hoax? Why attack the Department of Justice for releasing documents? A genuine whistleblower proud of their moral stand wouldn't need to deny, distract, or cover tracks. They would embrace the hero narrative. Trump doesn't. The contradictions extend to the release of documents related to Epstein. Trump claims all DOJ records have been handed over, yet these documents do not confirm him as the hero informant. Instead, they mostly consist of old records that have already been public for years. Meanwhile, Michael Wolff reports that Epstein himself thought Trump informed authorities not to say victims, but to protect his own involvement in both financial and personal misdeeds. What does this tell us? That Trump's defenders, people like Johnson and Mace, are trying to simplify a very messy story. They want viewers to see Trump as a hero, when the evidence suggests he may have been protecting himself first. And every public statement Trump makes about Democrats and hoaxes only complicates the narrative further, adding layers of distraction to hide his true role. Then there's the media coverage. Conservative commentators celebrate Trump as a moral figure, emphasizing that he banned Epstein or reported him to the feds. But if you dig deeper, you see how inconsistent these claims are. Trump continued socializing with Epstein long after supposed outrage, bragged about partying with young women, and downplayed Epstein's predatory behavior. These facts contradict the hero story and align more with Wolff's claim. Trump acted as an opportunist, prioritizing his self-interest over justice. Finally, this section reminds us of an important point. Narratives in politics are often manipulated to fit a desired image. By framing Trump as the heroic informant, his supporters attempt to overwrite evidence of questionable behavior, shady financial dealings, and continued association with Epstein. The reality, as we'll see in later sections, is far more complex and far less flattering for the former president. Now we move into one of the most suspicious pieces of this puzzle, the Palm Beach mansion and the involvement of a Russian oligarch. This story ties together Trump, Epstein, and international money in a way that raises serious questions. Back in 2004, Donald Trump purchased a mansion in Palm Beach for about $41 million. The property had previously been owned by another buyer, Abe Gossman. Trump claimed he spent around $3 million on renovations and later sold it in 2008 for $95 million. On the surface, it looks like a profitable flip, but when you dig deeper, the details start to raise eyebrows. Why such a dramatic increase in value? Was it really just paint and minor upgrades, or was there more going on behind the scenes? Michael Wolff's reporting, based on conversations with Jeffrey Epstein, suggests there was more. Epstein had been eyeing the property himself, intending to buy it for $36 million. He trusted Trump to provide some friendly advice on remodeling the pool to increase its value. But Trump went behind Epstein's back, bought the mansion for $41 million, and effectively blocked Epstein from closing the deal. Fast forward 4 years, and the mansion is sold to Dmitry Rybolovlev, a Russian billionaire in the fertilizer industry. Rybolovlev paid $95 million and then immediately demolished the house, citing mold. That's highly unusual behavior. Why pay nearly $100 million for a house only to tear it down? Journalists and investigators have long considered this a red flag for potential money laundering. Funds moving from Russia into U.S. real estate through opaque transactions. Here's where Epstein's suspicions become critical. He reportedly believed that the original $41 million Trump used to buy the mansion might have come from Russian sources. If true, it suggests that Trump was acting as a middleman, facilitating the movement of large sums of money while personally profiting from the deal. Epstein felt betrayed not just financially, but personally. He had trusted Trump, and now he was blocked from what he believed was his rightful opportunity. The fallout between Trump and Epstein was swift. Epstein began threatening lawsuits and hinted he could expose Trump's connections to Russian money, possibly framing him as a frontman in a laundering operation. According to Wolff, this is when Trump allegedly tipped off authorities, not out of morality, but to protect himself from exposure. In other words, Trump's role as an informant might have been driven by fear, not heroism. This real estate story connects to a broader narrative: Trump's entanglement with Epstein and foreign money. It shows how personal gain, political ambition, and shady international transactions can intersect in ways that are easy to miss unless you follow the details closely. Understanding this Mansion deal is crucial because it sheds light on why Epstein's files could be so dangerous. If these documents reveal evidence of money moving from Russia into Trump-related real estate, it could explain both Trump's fear of exposure and the efforts by his defenders to recast the story as one of heroism. In short, this isn't just a property flip, it's a flashpoint in a web of betrayal, money, and power, one that intersects with both Epstein's crimes and Trump's controversial dealings. Epstein had Polaroid photos showing Trump with underage girls at his Palm Beach mansion. Some photos were explicit, girls topless on Trump's lap, and other compromising images. Epstein reportedly kept these photos in a safe. FBI confiscated everything after his arrest. This contradicts the hero-informant narrative pushed by Trump's defenders. Trump's role as an informant, if it existed, was likely motivated by self-preservation, not morality. Combined with the Mansion deal and Russian money connections, these photos deepen the web of potential leverage, manipulation, and scandal. Now let's examine Donald Trump's social life with Jeffrey Epstein, because it's one of the clearest windows into his behavior and the contradictions in his public narrative. Trump didn't just know Epstein casually, he attended parties, socialized with women brought to these gatherings, and interacted with Epstein's inner circle. These weren't minor events, they were high-profile, often photographed, and sometimes documented in video footage. One of the most revealing examples comes from Mar-a-Lago parties in the early 1990s. Footage shows Trump surrounded by women, music blaring, as he interacts with Epstein and other men. Trump alternates between dancing, pointing out young women, and even commenting on their appearance directly to Epstein. The clips depict a man fully aware of his surroundings and comfortable in the company of both Epstein and these young women. Michael Wolff also recounts Epstein showing him Polaroid photos, as discussed earlier, capturing Trump with underage girls. These images, combined with the video footage, reinforce a critical point. Trump's defenders claim he was morally outraged by Epstein's behavior, yet he continued to socialize with him and participate in environments that were clearly exploitative. Even after Trump rose to public prominence, he downplayed these associations or framed them in a positive light. For instance, Trump has repeatedly praised Epstein as a terrific guy, even long after allegations surfaced. He denied wrongdoing while simultaneously benefiting socially and financially from his connection with Epstein. These conflicting actions suggest a pattern. Trump's public statements frequently contradict his private behavior, making it difficult to reconcile his hero narrative with documented interactions. Furthermore, Trump's involvement with Epstein extends beyond casual socializing. According to Wolff, Epstein threatened Trump over the Palm Beach mansion and other financial dealings. Trump's response, reportedly tipping off law enforcement, was not a straightforward moral intervention. It was a calculated move to protect himself from potential exposure of both personal misconduct and suspicious financial transactions, including ties to Russian money. This pattern of contradictions, publicly condemning or downplaying, while privately benefiting or covering up, is a recurring theme. Mega defenders like Mike Johnson and Nancy Mace attempt to simplify the narrative, portraying Trump as a courageous whistleblower. But the facts suggest otherwise. His behavior was self-serving, opportunistic, and often contradictory. Understanding this section is essential because it illustrates how complex the Epstein-Trump story really is. It's not just about financial deals or photographs. It's about a web of personal, social, and political decisions that intersect in ways that often favor Trump's self-interest over morality. In the next section, we'll dive deeper into the political narrative, exploring how Trump and his allies framed the Epstein story as a Democratic hoax, despite the mounting evidence and contradictions in his behavior. This will help us see how media spin, personal ambition, and historical facts collide to create a story far more complicated than the one his supporters present. Now that we've examined Trump's personal involvement and the Epstein Mansion deal, let's explore the political narrative that surrounds this story. Donald Trump has repeatedly framed the Epstein saga as a Democratic hoax, comparing it to other controversies like Russia, Russia, Russia. This framing is strategic. It redirects attention away from his own behavior and casts doubt on the seriousness of the allegations. Trump's social media posts and public statements consistently downplay Epstein's crimes, while simultaneously implying that Democrats are trying to manipulate public perception. According to Trump, the Democratic Party knew all along about Epstein's illegal activities but did nothing during his lifetime. Only after Epstein's death did they suddenly show concern for the victims. This selective outrage, Trump claims, is proof of political manipulation. But let's pause and analyze this. If Trump were genuinely a moral hero who exposed Epstein, why dismiss the investigation as a hoax? Why fight the release of documents and claim full compliance while simultaneously demanding redactions? Michael Wolff's reporting suggests a simpler explanation. Trump's behavior was motivated by self-interest. He acted to protect himself from exposure, not to save victims. The hoax narrative functions as a political shield, deflecting scrutiny from his own complicity. The media spin amplifies this effect. Conservative outlets highlight Trump's supposed moral action, banning Epstein from Mar-a-Lago, alerting law enforcement, while glossing over the contradictions, continued socializing, financial deals, and alleged involvement with underage girls. Supporters like Mega Mike Johnson and Nancy Mace reinforce this simplified story, framing Trump as a hero. Yet the documented evidence tells a far more complex tale. Consider the timing. The DOJ released thousands of pages of documents in response to congressional subpoenas, but these were largely old records, not new revelations. Despite Trump claiming that all documents have been turned over, there's no public evidence confirming him as a heroic informant. Meanwhile, Epstein's files reportedly contain sensitive information on Trump's financial dealings, real estate transactions, and personal associations. Information he may have wanted to keep hidden. The political strategy becomes clear. By labeling everything a Democratic hoax, Trump not only deflects criticism but also rallies his base around a narrative of persecution. This tactic allows him to control the conversation, framing himself as the victim of a politically motivated attack rather than the participant in a morally and legally troubling network. Ultimately, the Democrat hoax narrative masks the deeper story. Trump's personal actions, Epstein's suspicions, the mansion deal with the Russian oligarch, and the photographs of underage girls all suggest that the reality is far more complicated than the simple hero versus villain framing presented by his defenders. Understanding this political spin is crucial for connecting the dots in the final sections, where financial, social, and legal threads converge to form a comprehensive picture of Trump's involvement. As we reach the final section, it's time to connect all the pieces. Trump, Epstein, the Russian oligarch, and the tangled web of money, manipulation, and self-preservation. Each element, from the Palm Beach mansion to the photographs and political spin, forms a pattern that reveals the complexity of the story. Let's start with the mansion. Trump bought the property in 2004 for $41 million, only to sell it 4 years later to Dmitry Rybolovlev, a Russian billionaire, for $95 million. The extreme increase in price, combined with Rybolovlev immediately demolishing the house, raises serious questions about possible money laundering and foreign involvement in U.S. real estate. Epstein, who had been outbid on the property, was furious and felt personally betrayed. That betrayal led Epstein to threaten Trump with lawsuits and potential exposure. He reportedly warned that Trump's role in shady financial dealings could be revealed, as well as his personal associations with underage girls. According to Michael Wolff, Trump's decision to alert authorities was likely motivated not by morality, but by fear that Epstein would destroy him before he could act. This flips the hero-informant narrative on its head. The photographs of underage girls with Trump at Epstein's Palm Beach mansion add a deeply personal dimension. These images, reportedly kept in Epstein's safe, could have been used as leverage, creating a scenario where Trump's involvement was both legal and reputationally risky. Combined with the financial transactions, these elements suggest that Trump's actions were driven by self-preservation rather than heroism. Then there's the political narrative. Trump and his allies framed the Epstein story as a Democratic hoax, deflecting attention and rallying supporters. By labeling the investigation and document releases as politically motivated, Trump attempts to control the narrative, distract from his own behavior, and portray himself as a victim. Mega supporters like Mike Johnson and Nancy Mace amplify this simplified story, creating a public perception that contrasts sharply with the documented reality. Ultimately, when we look at the full picture, Epstein's suspicions, Trump's socializing with him, the mansion deal with a Russian oligarch, the photographs, and the political spin, a pattern emerges. It's not a story of clear heroes and villains. It's a story of power, betrayal, and self-interest. Trump's involvement appears opportunistic, shaped by the need to protect himself while benefiting from Epstein's connections. This narrative is a cautionary tale about the intersection of wealth, influence, and morality. Public narratives can be spun, political allies can defend, and media can simplify. But when you examine the facts, the motivations and actions of those involved reveal a more complicated truth. In the end, the Epstein story, The Mansion deal, the Russian connection, and Trump's role remind us that power and self-preservation often overshadow morality. What may appear as heroism can, on closer inspection, be opportunism. And what seems like betrayal may, in fact, be survival within a high-stakes world of wealth, crime, and influence. This brings closure to our examination, tying together the threads of money, power, and self-interest, and leaving us to question the narratives presented to the public versus the actions taken behind closed doors.